pretty important assignment. So join me as we get the scoop on how a newspaper is made. We'll talk with the people who cover the stories and the men and women responsible for getting the paper out to you. Plus, we'll follow some young reporters as they cover their own story. So grab your notebooks and stop the presses. We're going on a field trip. Pack up your juice pack, put them in your backpack. Yippee-ki, yippee-yippee-yip. Don't be slow and ready to go. We're leaving on a field trip. There's so much to discover, so much to do and see. Who knows what we'll uncover? And I'm waiting patiently. We'll take a hike, we'll ride a bike, we'll dig for dinosaurs. We'll sing a song, so come along. It's time to go explore. What? Field trip kids uncover the story behind the headlines? Boy, these kids are everywhere, and now they scoop me on a story. My editor's not gonna like this. The things you find out about in a newspaper.
The newspaper is printed and delivered every day, and Field Trip sent a group of young reporters to find out how that's done.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Washington Post. I'm Joyce and this is Stella, and we're going to tell you about the Northwest plant. So come on in, and we're going to take the elevator to 7.
I better call my editor. Sounds like there could be a story here. Find out who these kids are and just what they're up to.
This newspaper was founded in 1877 by Mr. Stilson Hutchins. And when it started, it had a circulation of 10,000. It contained 4 pages, and it only cost 3 cents per copy.
Nearly every story printed in the Washington Post gets written right here in the newsroom.
We're now here in the newsroom, and if you were holding this paper and looking around here, you would see that this newsroom is laid out just like this newspaper in different sections.
There's a news obituary section, the Metro section, which covers news in the local area, national news, and foreign news. Plus, reporters in bureaus across the country and around the world also work and write for the Post.
In this section. The bell that is ringing now is to let people know in the newsroom it is time for Story Conference at 2 o'clock.
Story Conference is where editors like Joanne Armeo decide what stories will be in tomorrow's paper.
I manage all of the reporters and editors who cover local news in the Washington area. I have a staff of about 144 people. What an editor does is basically decide on a day-to-day basis and on a week-to-week basis what stories we're going to cover, who's going to cover them, how we're going to cover them, and where they go into the newspaper. When the stories come in, we edit them. We might change the lead. We check for spelling. We make sure that the story is fair. Do we have the complete picture? And then we decide where it's going to go in the paper.
What do you think about how everyone says, oh, the newspaper never puts anything positive and they always blow everything out of proportion?
Well, the fact of the matter is that we have to report news. And news oftentimes is when something bad happens or when something goes wrong. If there's a bridge that's standing, we're not going to, that's nothing, it's news. That's what's supposed to happen. It's when a bridge collapses and people get hurt that news happens. And by doing those stories, I think that we help.
Who answers the letters to the editor?
The letters to the editor are part of a completely different department. The Washington Post has a division between news and editorial. Letters to the editor are expressions of opinion from our editors, and this is the chance that readers have to be able to write back, to be able to say, I read that story, I didn't like it, I read that story, I thought you were wrong.
What's the hardest part about your job?
The hardest part about my job is probably giving people bad news, people who I work with and work for me, because part of my job is managing people and telling people when they do a good job, when they do a bad job.
What piece of advice would you most want to give young reporters and editors like us?
Read. What I look for in reporters is a highly developed sense of curiosity. If someone is curious and wants to satisfy their curiosity, they're going to make great reporters.
Okay, I'm on it. Just as I thought. My editor said, get the story on these kids. So I've got to follow up my next lead. Maybe she can tell us what this Children's Express thing is all about.
Children's Express is a 21-year-old organization. It was founded in 1976 by a man named Bob Clampett. What we do is give children a significant voice in the world. And we do that through a method of oral journalism, where young people learn the techniques of reporting, and they go out and interview young children and teenagers and adults about what's important to children and their lives. Their voices are heard many ways. One is through a newspaper column that's syndicated to a number of newspapers around the country. Another is on radio and sometimes on television. A team of Children's Express reporters who are 8 to 13 go out with the teenage editor on a story. And the way that that story is usually handled is that the young people decide what they want to do a story on. They make the contacts with the person they're going to interview. They ask all the questions internally and do a briefing themselves, and then they go out on the story.
Are you a Clinton's reporter?
Once they've finished asking questions, and all of this is tape recorded, then they come back and tape a debriefing as well.
Let's do our debriefing before we go any place.
And that debriefing, along with the tape recorded transcripts, becomes the core of the story that's going to be composed.
So they're a bunch of aspiring young reporters. I gotta go back to the paper. I've got a lot more research to do on this one.
Field Trip will be right back after these messages. And now back to Field Trip.
So Children's Express is a news service, and those kids are reporters. They've had more stories published than I'll ever have. News desk, Polisar. What? They're doing an interview at the Post right now with Pierre Thomas, the reporter? Scooped again.
I'm Pierre Thomas. I cover the Justice Department for the Washington Post, and I've been here about 10 years. And in covering the Justice Department, my job is to follow the activities of the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and I also cover issues like terrorism and crime. There are basically two types of stories that I do. They're the breaking stories. It's basically following that story, trying to determine what happened, talking to law enforcement officials, trying to get a sense of actually what occurred. And then there are other stories that are enterprise stories where I might take an event or an issue and try to write about it.
What's the most interesting part about your job?
I guess it's the challenge of getting information. Much of what I do involves getting people to tell me things that they perhaps should not tell me. And that's a huge challenge. So to get people to tell you information, you first have to get them to trust you.
How long does it take to get a story published?
It ranges. Sometimes it's a single day. Other times we might work on a story for a couple months.
You said that to get people to tell you things, you have to gain their trust. How do you do that?
One way is to let them read the stories I've written before. They can read the stories, they can get a sense of, well, is this guy trying to be fair? Does he air both sides? Is he accurate in his information? The other way is to be fairly well versed in the subject matter when you talk to them.
So my editor still wants this story. I've got to try to meet up with those kids. Maybe I'll take the camera along and take a few pictures to go along with my story.
Washington Post photographer Bill O'Leary shows us how photos get from the camera into the newspaper.
Take a film, take a negative, stick it in our film carrier, and scan it digitally into a computer.
After the photo is scanned, Bill touches it up.
Subject of the picture.
How does the picture get from here to the paper?
From all of these computers, as each photographer finishes an assignment, they have to transfer their picture to our picture desk, which is in another part of the building. So I grab it, and I drag it and move it over here. Bam, there we go. Now, Doggy is in the picture desk. There he is. Normally, with an assignment, we'll move 2 or 3 pictures each. Our bosses, the picture editors, will take a look on their screen, they'll call that up and they'll say, I like that one, I don't like that one, and they'll decide, we'll just move this one over. But eventually we'll go to the layout editor, who'll get it up on his or her screen, crop it, and ship it downstairs to engraving, where they'll put it into the actual page that you're going to see tomorrow morning.
How many rolls of film do you think you might use in a day? And how many pictures out of that many pictures you take in a day do you think you might use?
Well, we might use, if I have 3 assignments in a day, and I say, let's say I shoot 4 rolls of film per assignment, so that's,
How many exposures?
that's 12, 36 exposures on a roll. So that's 12 rolls of film. For each assignment, I might turn in 2 pictures, 6 pictures out of 12 rolls.
A lot of us take pictures for our Children's Express service, and what advice would you give to young, aspiring photographers?
Don't take your picture till you know it's what you want. Don't be afraid to move, and don't be afraid to get close.
Maps and illustrations are also used throughout the paper. They are done by the graphics department and people like Marty Barrett.
Our department does a lot of functions for the paper. We essentially help tell the story, help the reader get more details. A big function is our mapping department. We create a lot of maps to show where stories are taking place. I'm a page designer, so I do a few sections like this, which are color, and I find these most interesting. I pulled together different images, like this I got from the National Symphony Orchestra, and I had an illustrator in the department draw this hand with a baton, and then we found an image of a violin, and I put it together.
Did they used to do all of this stuff that you're doing now by hand?
That's a good question. When I first started, we did everything by hand. We had to draw all our bars by hand and use a calculator and figure out the size that the bars should be. But now a computer automatically does that for us. Yeah, it's changed an awful lot.
Did you always want to do this?
I always wanted to do art. I'd never realized I'd be on a computer when I started. I thought I'd be at an easel painting or drawing, but I never thought it would be so high-tech.
Boy, I have got a lot of stuff here. I better get writing. Definitely have to file my story. File? That's when you take your story to the editor, who then reviews it, changes it, and sends it down to composing. Composing is where the stories, pictures, and graphics all come together to begin the process of producing the paper.
Welcome to the Washington Post Composing Room. My name's Sherry Greider, and I'm the Director of Advertising Operations here at the Post. This is Jane Golightly. She's the Assistant Superintendent of Composing.
The process starts with a blank grid sheet and a dummy.
What that is basically a guideline for us to use to tell us where the various pieces go on the page. Now, once a news editor sends this down, they'll send us the type and the photographs, and the compositors down here on the floor will cut and paste to match the dummy.
Before computers, each letter and space had to be set by hand. Then along came the linotype machine, which allowed typesetters to set lines of copy. Today, reporters file their stories on computers, which set type electronically.
On the next one, this is a negative. As you can see, it's a representation exactly of the front page. Now, Jane is going to show you exactly the process that we go through to get this negative.
Most of you have already seen fax machines probably at your homes. You might have them in your schools and offices, just a typically small fax machine. We have 2 very large fax machines here. We call them fax machines or transmitters. You saw this in the other room where we have a page ready to send. And every evening we send these out to 3 different plants. And what it does, the machine just scans the page, push this key. It should only take a few seconds and then you'll see it come back out. And this is transmitting this now to 3 of our plants.
What's the most challenging part of getting a newspaper out?
Making our deadlines. That is the most challenging part. If we miss a deadline, and then the trucks then will be delivering them late. They might miss the actual connection then with the flights that they're going to be on. That's the biggest factor, and that's the most challenging part.
How many times do you send faxes out to the other plants?
And how long does it take from the time you send it to the time they receive it?
We would send about 80 to 100 pages during the evening. And 1 page, and I see someone signing here, that's pretty good, you're picking up sign language, good. But it takes about 7 minutes to send a page. That's it. It's that simple.
Field Trip will be right back after these messages.
And now back to Field Trip.
These Children's Express reporters really know how to get their story. I mean, they've talked to a reporter, an editor, a photographer. They even talked to a graphics and layout person, and now they're going to the printing plant.
Good morning. Welcome to the Washington Post at our Springfield facilities. We produce the Virginia portion of the Washington Post, but we also produce all of the comics that you find in your Sunday paper, and we do all of the advertising insert that you find in your papers. Also, at night, which we printed last night, starting about 10:30 in the evening, is the Washington Post. Tonight we'll start printing Friday's paper. This that we're running today is part of Friday's paper. So when we start running the head sheet, what we call the head sheet, what you know is the Washington Post tonight, this will go out to our dealers, and then tomorrow morning you'll get Friday's paper, and it'll be delivered to your doorstep, and that'll be the complete Washington Post.
Like Alan said, this is called the head sheet. It contains the headline and the masthead. Some people call that the logo. Also has the bylines under each article. Tells you who wrote those articles. Get it? The by line.
Do you go all the way throughout the world or just in America?
We're basically a local paper, but we do ship to most cities around the country, New York, Los Angeles, and we mail all around the country. Anybody who wants the Washington Post, we will mail it to them anywhere in the world.
Have you ever not had a paper ready on time?
That is the primary function of the Washington Post, is to put out the best product we can on time. And it has to be on time, so we get it to the readers on time who have jobs to go to in the morning. So we are not late.
It is now time for us to see how the paper is printed. Our first stop is the fax machine in the plate room to find our negatives.
Okay, inside of both of these machines is a box like this that has a big roll of that film in it. And all it does is it feeds that roll of film out underneath the head of a laser. And that's activated from downtown's transmission, and it exposes that film to make a negative. That piece of film comes out of that piece of equipment into the developer, and then it drops out into this basket.
The negatives are placed in this machine, which make the plates.
This will go in, and you'll see it move inside. What you'll see come in here now will be a plate with the negative sitting on top of it. There's the negative, and the plate's right under it. Now all that light is doing is burning that image into the plate.
The plate is washed with a developing solution, and all the unburned areas are scrubbed away. Then a special gum is applied to help direct the ink to all the spots on the plate that will become the letters and pictures.
About how many plates does it take to make one paper?
If you have a 100-page paper, it takes 100 plates. And you have 4 presses, so that's 400 plates. See, that just came down on each side and bent that.
That's to help hold the plates to the cylinders on the press.
Now you got ink up on this cylinder, on this blanket cylinder, and there's the paper back there. When you start up the press, this roller literally moves into that, so it's touching.
The press actually goes through the floor to the basement where the newsprint is attached.
How do you get these rolls into here?
They come in from a warehouse on the other side. I'll show you. They come on little carts. They're putting a new roll on here. They'll take off the brown paper that's just used to protect the paper.
This room holds all the paper that will be used to print the weekend editions of the Post.
How many rolls does it take to make one paper?
We get off of each roll 28,000 pages. Okay, each night we use about 230 rolls in this plant. Right behind you, that's coming from the press downstairs. That's the original product. It comes right around here, and it comes into this stacker.
Once the head sheets are stacked, they're bundled and kicked into trays that will deliver them to waiting trucks. Special sections that need to be shipped to the other plants have one more stop to make.
We're bundling them up and wrapping them up so we can send them. These are going to go out the back loading dock and ship to the other plants so they have it for tonight when they start running their newspaper.
Now here's something I learned researching my story. On a typical day, the Washington Post includes 170 headlines, 150,000 words, 62 photographs, drawings, and charts, 43 comic strips and panels, and and a whole lot of ads.
And speaking of ads, this collating machine puts them together for delivering in Sunday's paper.
Okay, these are all the pieces of advertising for the Sunday paper. And as it goes down, it picks up different pieces of advertising. At the end, it'll put the comics and the TV guide in, and then it'll wrap it up.
30 to 40 million pieces of advertising are packaged over the 5 days it takes to produce the Sunday Post.
Field Trip will be right back after these messages.
And now, back to Field Trip.
Yeah, thanks for the tip. I hear our young reporters are about to get a new assignment.
Inauguration Day gave our Field Trip reporters and their Children's Express colleagues the chance to show off their skills as reporters. The day began with a briefing by Bureau Chief Robert Beasy.
You guys are going to go out and do the swearing-in ceremony, and then you're going to do the parade. I want you to interview people coming in and going out before and after the ceremony.
Each team of reporters is accompanied by a teen editor who provides support and guidance.
I need to make sure you all have a quarter, all have a business card with CE's telephone number on it. We try to encourage the kids to read the newspaper because a lot of story ideas that we get can come from the newspaper. That's the other place that we get our story ideas. The most important things that we're going to do are going to happen before and after the swearing-in ceremony.
Armed with a tape recorder and a whole lot of questions, the team set out to cover the events.
Why did the DNC spend so much money on this inauguration?
Well, the inauguration is like the biggest celebration we have here, so they go all out for it.
Why do you think the inauguration is important?
He's the leader of our country.
Do you feel this term will be better than the last?
If Congress can work together.
Do you think that President Clinton will continue to do what he promised?
I hope so.
What goals do you hope Clinton and Gore will accomplish this time?
This time? The deficit?
What should they do to improve the country in the next 4 years?
Coming up with some good ideas.
During the last 4 years, do you think Clinton has done anything positive to affect your life?
I don't know.
Children's Express reporters file their stories in the debriefing. That's a discussion with other reporters and staff about the person or event they've covered.
President Clinton said that we must keep our old democracy forever young.
The discussions are recorded and transcribed and become the stories that appear in various papers across the country.
I think that people are going to realize that it's more to the American people than just the negative side.
Why don't you grab it on paper, do your editing with the highlighter, and then we can come back in and edit down from there.
So, what do these young reporters have to say about their jobs?
It's a commitment if you want to do big things. Like I went to the convention this summer and inauguration, you have to put in a lot of hours and work. And it's hard work, but it's fun.
One thing I definitely know, it looks good on my record. If you're into the news and journalism, you should be able to enjoy this.
Children's Express has really helped me a lot, and journalism is really fun.
Almost done. Hey, here's a lead for you. You can find out more about Children's Express at their internet address. www.ce.org. And you can read the Washington Post online at www.washingtonpost.com. Done! News desk, Polisar. Yep, I'm bringing it down right now. What? Okay. Looks like a late-breaking news story just killed mine. Well, on to another assignment. See you next time on Field Trip!
This is the artwork for yellow. Now, you have the artwork for red. All right.
These and all accepted.
Now, blue and yellow, you get green, and then the artwork that's black. Then a plate is done for each of those colors.
What is the best part about your job?
But the job is interesting. It's different every day. And the best part about this job is showing you kids exactly what goes on in the paper.